Amid the continuing face-off between India and China along the LAC in Ladakh, China released 10 Indian soldiers on Thursday evening. This came after Foreign Affairs Minister, External Affairs Minister S Jaishankar said there were no soldiers of India who were unaccounted for. Now, does it in a way indicate an easing of tensions between the two countries? Is there some kind of thaw in government matters today? Snehesh Alex Philip will bring us all the answers to my questions as well as to your questions, which we are hoping you would send in the course of this conversation. Snehesh, so just run us through what has happened yesterday, because there have been developments every day and we've been trying to keep our readers and viewers abreast through your stories as well as through our show, The Government Matters. But what happened yesterday? What has happened since?
Well, what happened yesterday was that yesterday, as we mentioned, was the third round of talks at the higher level, which is at the Major General level. These talks happened in the Galwan Valley. Now, following that, there were 10 Indian soldiers who were with the Chinese. They've been released yesterday, last evening, and they walked back, and they are currently with their respective units.
Right. So, but this came after the External Affairs Minister said there were no soldiers unaccounted for. Now, it's also a question of how you phrase things, right?
See, the army had also issued a statement, similar statement, and so if you're asking the question whether the External Affairs Ministry or the army lied,
I'm not asking that.
No, there are a lot of people questions about that. The answer to that is no, because technically they are right. Because at the time, what the army is like, there is no missing soldiers. All soldiers have been accounted for. Right. It's because the soldiers were already handed over, so they were with the Indians, so there was no missing soldiers per se.
Right. I mean, this is all a question of technicality, but there is also a question of transparency that comes in, but we'll come to that later. So in a way, the return of 10 soldiers, does it show there is some kind of relaxation in tensions between the two countries, a thaw maybe?
Well, if you are in specific to Galwan, yes, there is a thaw as far as Galwan is concerned, but as I said, what happened on Monday evening was something which is very sad. It was not an expected thing, but we've been maintaining right from the very beginning that the real trouble area is the Pangong Lake area, right. The finger area where the Chinese are sitting at finger 4. Now, yesterday a series of satellite images have come out which shows and very clearly that there is large number of the Chinese construction that has taken place between finger 4 and finger 8. Remember that finger 8 is the LAC as far as India is concerned. Now, so if the Chinese are sitting anywhere between finger 8 and finger 2, which India dominates, they are sitting...
then it's a transgression.
It's absolutely a transgression. So as of now, the Chinese have captured the heights as well as the lower slopes of finger 4, which to block the Indians from patrolling up till finger 8, which is the LAC.
Right. I mean, it's all right to say that both the MEA and the army were technically right in saying that there are no soldiers unaccounted for because 10 have been sent back by China. But there is also a question of concealing information. Since Monday, we've not heard of these 10 soldiers until now.
Well, there is no concealment. I would not call it the concealment of information. For example, we are well aware that, we at ThePrint were aware on Wednesday afternoon itself that there was a group of 10 soldiers who were in the Chinese captivity. But the fact is that at that time, there are a number of negotiations taking place. So you don't want this information to come out in public because this affects the overall negotiation that is on between the two sides. There are lives at stake. Yes, it's a different thing. Once the soldiers have returned, the stories, the information is made public, and which many of the media organizations have gone ahead and have now.
So now all soldiers are accounted for. Now there are no missing soldiers. Is that
there are no missing soldiers. All soldiers have been accounted for. There are no soldiers that the Chinese have in their custody.
Right, so far. Right. So now we have questions from certain audience members. I'll go ahead with them. Amit Joshi, all this while the GOI and the army have been saying that none of our soldiers are unaccounted for. Well, does it mean that they've been lying so far? This is what
Well, as I said, they're not lying.
What could be the reason for this, apart from loss of face?
Well, as I said, they were never lying about the fact that none of the soldiers were accounted for. They were absolutely right when they say that all soldiers have been accounted for, and none of the soldiers are missing because. Remember, the official statement only came in the evening.
After the soldiers were released.
After the soldiers were released. So that is the case.
Right. Kaustubh Savkar, do we know if our captive soldiers were given treatment as per the Geneva Convention?
Well, the Geneva Convention is for the prisoners of war. So there are no POWs.
Right. This is
in this case. This is a different case. However, as the story mentions, that the soldiers came back walking on their own, which clearly indicates that there were no serious injuries, that they needed any help to be carried back to the Indian side for that matter.
Right. Karthik, there has been news coming out that China has captured some land and a few military posts in Arunachal Pradesh. Is that true?
Well, there were some reports which have come out on that front. The army has denied those reports, saying that these are absolutely speculative in nature.
Right. Ashish Sangle, is it possible that the government is hiding the actual number of casualties among Indian soldiers?
This is something that I tweeted last night also. There's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of information that is floating around which talks about higher casualties. And if you don't mind, I'd like to go back to the for the exact information about the number of casualties that India has, and this information comes from the highest possible sources, and these are absolutely true figures, and I've not even a 0.1% doubt in them. As far as the figures are concerned, remember that the death toll is 20. And this is exactly what I tweeted. A lot of speculative figures on Indian casualties in Galwan is doing rounds. Please note that the fatal casualties on the Indian side is 20. 18 soldiers are at the army hospital in Leh, will be on duty in about 15 days. 58 soldiers are at other hospitals, should be back on duty within a week since they have minor injuries. So 20 is the casualty figure, fatal casualties, and 58 plus 18 is the total injuries that have taken place, of which 4 were critical earlier, and this is something that we've discussed in the past. But thankfully, God willingly, the 4 are now out of danger.
So this is the official information that we have so far.
This is the casualty figures that we have.
Arjun Parmeswaran, the public was made to understand that no soldiers were taken prisoners and that all were accounted for. How does the government explain this? So, Snehesh, I know you have said that technically the government is not wrong. They made that statement, the External Affairs Minister made that statement only once the soldiers were released. I also know that there is a sensitivity attached to it. You can't just say that there are 10 soldiers in Chinese captivity when you're trying to negotiate. But there has been a big question mark on the transparency that both the government and the army have demonstrated through this entire period.
There is no doubt about the fact that the information flow has been very curtailed. So most of the information that is coming out is from source base. So that's why you will at times see a disparity in reports that various media organizations are reporting. However, nobody really wants to go wrong with the information. Here we at ThePrint, there's a lot of information which comes in, which is checked through multiple sources. Though we don't name those sources, but these are information that is put out after a lot of checks and balances, and with the concerned authorities. Now, but yes, and this is something that we've argued in the past also, that the information flow has to be better. I think, after and this was something that was left wanting during the Balakot airstrike time also, where it was felt that the Pakistanis were much better at the information warfare. Now, there is no denying about the fact. For example, today at 7 o'clock is when Prime Minister Narendra Modi has convened an all-party meeting where he would be interacting with the political opposition leaders. However, early in the cut the clutter also, as our editor-in-chief Sheikh Gupta has mentioned, this could have been done earlier too. Now, as far as information flow is concerned, I believe that there should have been a proper briefing system, whether on record or off record, where where there is a uniformity of information that comes out,
Right.
and also one is never
There is
left
no scope for speculation.
There is no scope for speculation.
Right. And as you rightly said, at least keep the political leadership of the country informed. That is most important. There's a question from Shubham Bhatnagar. Why is China being so reckless, opening so many fronts by itself, be it Hong Kong, South China Sea, Taiwan, India, and through its allies like, say, Nepal?
Well, China has been, flexing his muscle, ever since this COVID crisis has come about. Remember that while the entire world is currently still facing the, the
Wrath of the pandemic, right?
Yeah, the wrath of the pandemic. The fact is that Chinese have come out of it, and the Chinese PLA, for that matter in specific, has come out of it, and or may have adapted themselves to this new crisis. So remember that while...
But there has been a fresh outburst in Beijing again of the virus. So they are dealing with the pandemic again.
They are dealing with the pandemic, but it's not that the entire system has fallen like in many other countries. As far as the PLA is concerned, the Indian Army was involved in Operation Namaskar, which was an effort and a drive to inform the masses about Corona, to help in the Corona anti-Corona activities, and also at the same time to ensure that Corona doesn't spread among its ranks. However, at this very same time, the Chinese were able to amass and carry out a major exercise, and troops and material, men and material from this particular exercise was diverted by the Chinese towards the LAC for carrying out what they have carried out.
Right.
So yeah, in the sense, the Chinese, there are a lot of it will take a longer time to explain. You can't really pinpoint exact one reason why China is doing. There are multiple reasons why
Right.
China is doing. As I said, one is the Corona after effect. There's a lot of internal trouble brewing in China itself. It's not that how everybody perceives that President Xi Jinping is the man in complete control in China. That is not the case. If you actually see that President Xi Jinping's power comes from the Politburo, the Communist, the CP,
which is true for all communist parties.
which is, yeah, so he's not the one man. I can tell you that Prime Minister Narendra Modi has more powers to do things independently than President Xi Jinping in China.
Right. Shantanu 3112, given the violent turn of events along the LAC, can we expect frequent cross-border firing as seen along the LOC?
Well, I've always I've pitched for change in the rules of engagement at the LAC. However, it is good that no shots have been fired. What happened in Galwan Valley on Monday evening was absolutely wrong. The Chinese outnumbered the Indians. They ganged up. It was a premeditated attack as far as India is concerned, and this has been made very clear by the Ministry of External Affairs, by the Foreign Minister himself. I'm not sure whether, I hope that this LAC doesn't become another LOC
Right.
kind of a situation, if that's what you're asking.
Right. Shravan Oza, do you think China is capable of doing something on the cyber front, which is a modern form of warfare?
Well, Chinese are one of the masters in the world when it comes to cyber warfare. So Chinese are capable of a lot of things. I know if you're following the global activities, for example, the Australians have now indirectly accused China of carrying out, cyber warfare against its systems. So, many countries are capable, and one of the lead runners when it comes to cyber warfare is China. There is no doubt about it.
Right. Rakshit Bharadwaj, what was the reason for China capturing 10 of our soldiers? Do you think the Chinese did it to overcome the aggressive clash they caused?
This was a clash that was happening. So like any clash, it was a free-for-all, hand-to-hand kind of a combat in which, the Chinese, of course, used, barbaric medieval weapons like clubs and sticks, with barbed wire on them and nails on them. But, there's no denying about the fact that the Indians were clearly outnumbered.
Right.
So if today I'm there with a group of, if I'm there with 4 of my other friends and about 30 others come and surround us and we get into a fight, it's very natural that, that there would be people who would be taken hostage in the sense so yeah.
Right. Sandeep Vyas, the External Affairs Minister, said that our soldiers carried weapons. Is it true? Now, actually, Snehesh, this does open a very interesting front because that has become a big point of contention. Congress leader Rahul Gandhi tweeted saying our soldiers were there unarmed. The External Affairs Minister reacted saying they were not unarmed, they were just following protocol by not using the weapons. So what really happened?
Well, the External Affairs Minister has said that the soldiers in Galwan were armed, but they didn't open fire. I think there needs to be a bigger question on why they didn't open fire. Yes, it also shows the amount of discipline that the Indian Army soldiers have, where despite extreme provocation, they followed the 1996 agreement. But however, at the same time, one will really have to see and understand whether the soldiers were actually carrying loaded rifles or not, and whether they were overwhelmed in the initial phases itself, and that's why they couldn't open fire. If at all, they were carrying firepower. So yes, that's a matter of that is a matter of
there is greater clarity that is needed.
There's a greater clarity that is needed as far as this particular incident is concerned. However, as I said, there needs to be a change in the rule of engagement. Not opening fire was a policy of not using firearms was a policy to ensure that no violence take place. Because at the LAC, the troops come face to face on a regular basis. There is pushing and shoving that takes place. But over the last few recent years, it has now come to, the Chinese have started pelting stones. So this, what happened on what happened on May 5th in the Pangong was the first of its kind where the Chinese used barbed wire, sticks with barbed wires and nails and other instruments, which was not used any time earlier. There was large number of Indian casualties also. Right. So I personally feel that even if the Chinese are doing opening fire, if it's the last resort, that is something that should be done.
Right. Abda1612 is the user handle. The Chinese government made a statement that they never had captured any Indian troops. Why did they make that statement?
Well, I don't think so. The Chinese have made a statement to that effect, saying that they've never captured the Indian troops. I'll actually again go back to a tweet. I'll go back to Twitter, in which there is an information. And the exact words used by the Chinese, as per this translation by this journalist Anand Krishnan, who is known to be China expert who's lived in China and has reported extensively on China, and he says that what the Chinese Foreign Ministry, the spokesperson said in Chinese was, which may be translated as, China has not presently seized any Indian personnel. So they are absolutely right. There are no Indian personnel with the Chinese PLA presently. So so as I said yesterday also, the army.
So it's a question of technicality and timing.
The army as well as the EMEA was also absolutely right when they said that all soldiers have been accounted for. There are no missing soldiers. Here also, if you go by this translation of this particular tweet, then the Chinese are also absolutely right. But it is interesting that let's leave aside the translation and what words he did or did not use. It's very interesting that 2 days back it was the Chinese who were saying that the Galwan it was the same spokesperson who said that the Galwan Valley is their territory, and it was the Indians who came in to the Chinese territory and attacked, which led to this clash. It's funny that suddenly this Chinese spokesperson who's become the new poster boy of truth.
The truth. Right. So do we have any idea of the casualties on the Chinese side yet? Because that seems to have again become a matter of speculation.
See, there cannot be any a proper calculation of casualties on the Chinese side. But there is no denying about the fact that the Chinese did suffer casualties. India is a democratic country. Here, the casualty figures are not hidden, it is said. But in China, that's not the case. Even in the 1962 war, the Chinese never came out with any casualty figures. It was only in 1994,
Right.
when certain papers were declassified, then one really came to know about the casualties suffered by China in the 1962 war. So I don't see the Chinese coming out with any official figures per se of how much casualties has been there, but I'm of the firm belief that casualties did take place on the Chinese side. However, for me, that is not what matters. What matters for me is that 20 of our men lost their lives.
Right. It's not a question of tit for tat or what happened that side and what happened this side.
Yeah, so it's not. I'm not getting into whether it's a question for tit for tat, but I'm not getting into the question of whether how much casualties was on the Chinese side.
I'll take one last question, Snehesh. This is from Rohan Mehta. Do China's actions pertain to the fact that India might open a front in Ladakh, as India is best positioned to launch an offensive in case of war? Is it insecurity on China's part? Is it also the Aksai Chin rhetoric that some of our politicians have been beating the drum around all this while?
Well, in the past also I have mentioned that the Chinese, there are a series of construction activities that are happening in the Galwan Valley. Now Galwan Valley is something which gives the Indians a direct link to Aksai Chin. Now, Aksai Chin, there is every single government in the past have maintained that Aksai Chin is a part of the Indian territory illegally occupied by the Chinese government. Now, with the spate of new construction, the pace at which the construction activities are going on, the Chinese, one of the reasons for, possible reasons for the aggression by the Chinese along the LAC is that they fear that, the construction activities would change the tactical advantage that China has as far as this region is concerned. And I've explained also in the past also that, there are certain areas, for example, there are certain areas at the LAC where the Chinese can reach in about half an hour. And when I say Chinese can reach, I mean they can reach with their, artillery, with their, because they have paved roads on the side, metal roads. However, Indians, take about 2.5 hours to cover the same distance that the Chinese have covered in half an hour.
Right.
That is because the Indians have to travel by foot. There are no paved roads, so even when the Indians reach there, the Indians would reach there on foot, carrying whatever that they can carry on them, which is basically your ammunition, your rifle, grenades, your rocket launchers. But however, the main in terms of supply, in terms of the bigger weapons, that won't be able to reach, that would take a much longer time.
Right.
So the Chinese are skeptical of these construction activities, fearing that if tomorrow India ever decides to get into the Aksai Chin and go for the Aksai Chin, which I don't think so, that despite whatever is being said, that
there has been a rhetoric. It's the
as I said, despite whatever is being said, I don't think so. There is any plan as of now to go and take over Aksai Chin.
Right.
But however, the Chinese are skeptical of it.
Right. Well, thank you, Snehesh, for demystifying this entire, whatever is happening, this entire incident, this entire episode. Let's hope it is just an episode. And thank you for sending in your questions. Do keep track of us at ThePrint for the latest on what's happening in Ladakh through the weekend as well. Thank you for watching.